Well, most people would love my job. It's an opportunity to travel, to meet people, to work, and it is hard work, but it's kind of rewarding to do. And although there are always going to be disagreeable aspects of it, if you work in a bank, Monday morning is hell, I imagine. If you're a shelf stacker at Sainsbury's, you're probably just not in the mood to do that half the time. But I have a really good job, and most of the time I'm having a good time. You might not know it looking at me. I look like a little old guy pushing the trolley through Sainsbury's, But it is a good, and in its way, I think, quite a positive lifestyle, as much as it's quite a rumour to the contrary. The rock and roll lifestyle cliches don't really apply to everybody. And I have a feeling that because of what I do, which does demand both mental and physical attention to some detail, then it probably does keep me marginally younger than I would otherwise be. So yeah, of course, travel is good and yet bad because, as we all know, we have quite a large carbon footprint, people like me, which is why most of the time I try to use public transport where I can. On the UK tour, for instance, I travelled by train. I was travelling on the train in Germany a couple of days ago, to and from a concert in the Ruhr of Germany. So yeah, travel is good, and I try and sit in the back of the punters and see what the real world is about, rather than driving around in limos or private jets.
I've done quite a lot of your Christmas concerts, and I do enjoy that. They set Christmas for me.
Yeah, well, I try to find the balance between the musical liturgy of the Christian Church, Anglicanism specifically, but I'm not trying to make fun of it or to poke fun at anything, but I think you've got to lighten it up a little bit and let people feel the spirit of Christmas. And I'm more than happy. I'm delighted if people come to church or cathedral to see one of my concerts and walk out through the door born again Christians. I'm absolutely delighted for them. It's just not going to happen to me. I'm a believer only in the sense of possibilities or even probabilities regarding some spiritual deity, some Godhead. It's, on balance, I think it's quite likely. It's quite likely, but I'm not a believer. I don't have faith. And a friend of mine who is a priest said to me once, he said, faith and doubt are joined at the hip. And he said, if you ever meet a priest who pretends to you, he never has those moments of doubt, of a little worry that maybe all this isn't what he thought it was. He said, he's lying. He's right. Vicar, you got a point? Do you wake up every morning?
I'm going to offer you a view. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But what you do is you nail your flag to the mast of the letter, the narrative that says God is a loving, caring Father, and that's what one holds on to.
And it's that doubt when you have it, and you have it, and you overcome it, that reinforces your faith and gives you all more meaning. Periodically, you actually go through that little reflection and it's awesome. That's me too. Just.
I wanted to ask if you found out anything in your travels through Jethro Tull's life, anything particularly interesting that you weren't expecting, or anything odd?
I will answer that from back here so they can hear. But yes, indeed, it was a bit spooky to read about Jethro Tull and elements of his life that suddenly, when I was reading it, I was actually on a car journey in northern Italy at the time, I think, and reading this on the internet. I had a connection, and I was struck by several elements of his life that, goodness me, I wrote a song about that, or on that subject or that topic. Oh, and then another one. So lots of these little elements of Jethro Tull's life suddenly seem to me all the more real, because coincidentally, and that's all it is, I mean, this is not some weird kind of gun. This is just coincidence. You know, if you write 300 songs, the chances are that 20 of them are going to be about somebody, you know, or a compendium of people that will make some kind of perhaps uncanny point of reference. It is just the law of averages. But nonetheless, there's several bits of his life that really did strike me as a little spooky, because it was quite close to topics that I'd written about. And so it was very easy then to say, okay, well, I've got this song, this song, this song. Suddenly I had, you know, 20 songs or 10 songs or whatever it was, just instantly that related to his life. And then I wrote a few 5 short songs to just pad it out a little bit, especially in regard to the repositioning of our Jethro tull in the contemporary age. It's always easier, isn't it, when you can give something a reference point that is about today, it's about the world we know, or the world that is coming, that maybe we're a little nervous about or insecure about. It's a bit more poignancy, but just always dwelling in the historical perspective. So whilst again it might seem a little you know, that I'm hijacking poor Jethro tull for my own purposes, it is about celebrating a man's life, and it is about paying homage to that man and his efforts, his enthusiasm. I mean, he wasn't a miracle worker, he didn't get it all right. He was totally misguided on a couple of basic points of agriculture, as it turned out. But the point was, he was enthusiastic. He was an energetic man who tirelessly worked to try and improve agriculture. And although it took a few decades before his work was recognised and began to really have its impact in British agriculture, he rightfully deserves his place in history, perhaps far more than I do. And it's nice to know that these days, if you do a Google search on Jethro tull, whilst it may throw up mainly references to the music band, there are now in the top 10 Google searches, or there were a couple of days ago, last time I looked, you know, references to Jethro tull, the historical character, but a few years ago there weren't. And that was kind of sad in a way. It was all just about Jethro tull, the rock band, and you know, in a way people weren't being drawn into the awareness that there's someone probably much more important than I could ever be as a musician who did something that we remember him for. And given that this is his resting place, it's for me very fitting and very humbling to be here today and to talk a little about it. So I gather you have something that you would like to say, Crispian?
Crispian, yes.
No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. You said Crispian, and I picked up on that.
That's right. Yeah, I know there's other questions, but I think we want to show you a couple of things, and we've got Guy Baxter from the University of Reading who's going to explain them. And then perhaps we can walk out to the monuments as well. I know there's a couple of people who want to talk to you. So we move around. Guy, do you want to just...
I just want to say a couple of things. I'm from the Museum of English Rural Life in Reading, which I hope many of you know, and if you don't know it, then do come and see us. We're actually, we didn't want to, we didn't want to miss the opportunity to bring the book, 2 copies in fact, of the book, of the horse hunting book, from the 1733 edition. So those of you who've not seen that before, do come over and see it. Come and see Jethro tull in his own words.
Sorry to interrupt, you've got the original first edition?
We've got a couple of copies of that first edition, that 1733 edition, so that's lovely. And we're a museum that's been there for over 60 years. We're actually currently closed to the public because we're doing a really big regeneration project to redisplay our galleries, and that's really to tell the story of the English countryside and farming and why that's important. And obviously, I'm sure people from Basildon will be very pleased to hear this. Obviously, Jethro tull features in that, but I don't know if it's worth. I mean, I think I agree with everything that Ian said about him. I mean, you know, he's part of an extraordinary group of people, and they're important because they change the way in which we can feed our population, and that enables all the other things that happen later. All the things that, I mean, if you remember the Olympics opening ceremony, all those chimneys going up, all that is possible because of these things that happen in agriculture, this ability to feed people living in cities, to have the population growing. And it's down to people, not just Jethro tull, because we like to say, here's one man who invented something that changed the world, but it's not quite that simple, of course. But to have, but the people who were around at that time, did extraordinary things, and part of what we're doing in the museum is talking about that, and also talking about the other issues. It will be featured featured in the same gallery where we're talking about genetic modification and where we're talking about artificial fertilisers and all the challenging issues, all the bad things we might say, that, or the things that are difficult for us to confront as a society. We're doing that as well. So it's kind of, I think he fits into a very broad story and a really important story. I also think these guys fit into it as well, because not only have you kind of kept his name up there, because I think, you know, most people of the agricultural revolution, Arthur Young and so on and so forth, perhaps didn't get major rock bands named after them, and therefore didn't perhaps live on them so much. So I think actually you keep his name going in many ways, and I think in public consciousness and keep that whole kind of part of history going. So I think you shouldn't do yourself down about that. I think you'd actually be quite surprised, but pleased. But also, you know, we are about how the idea of rural England has become so important in our culture, and you're part of, you're part of that. I mean, I think all kinds of forms of music are part of that, and I think there's a very strong element that